go to the August 7 to 9 turn. The German Second Army is about to attack the fortress city of Liège. Meanwhile, the German First Army is in Tongeren, and there is a gap in the Belgian lines at Tienen. The German Third Army, concentrated at Les Roches in Ardennes, is on its way to Namur, and so is the French Fifth Army. Who moves first is critical. If the Belgians have the opportunity to move first, they may plug the gap in their lines. If the French move first, they may relieve the Belgians at Namur, which will allow them to solidify their positions elsewhere. We pull the first chit of this turn, the German forced march event, and that will come in handy if the Third German Army is activated soon, that is before the French Fifth Army is activated. On to the next chit, and the Belgians get to move now. With the German Third Army in close proximity to Namur and the availability of that German forced march event, the Belgians cannot send the 15th Infantry Brigade at Namur to strengthen the garrison at Liège, nor plug the gap at Tienen, so that unit stays put. Belgians need to plug the gap at Tienen. There's a Garde Civique counter at Warem, so the Belgians move their 2nd Infantry Division to Tienen. Now we focus our attention at Hasselt, where the Belgians have 2 units with a total of 3 steps. By leaving 2 units at Hasselt, the Belgians ensure that the Germans cannot advance if they destroy one or both units here. If you just leave 1 unit and the Germans attack and eliminate that unit and sustain no losses, the Germans would be able to advance 1 more space. So that's a sacrificial move that the Belgians are making here to stop the advance at Hasselt, and the same has to be done here at Tienen. And therefore, the Belgian 1st Infantry Division will move here to Tienen. And that leaves the garrison at Liège to have to fend off with what it has. 2 units, 1 of them reduced, and the fortress to contend against the German Second Army or the First Army if it is attacked. The Belgians do not have any more mobile units. And that's the end of their activation. So we pull the next chit, and it's von Bülow's 2nd German Army. And if the Germans want to maintain any type of momentum, von Bülow has to fall upon the fortress of Liège now. Note that this attack is made without the Big Bertha event for the Germans. The Germans are hard-pressed for time, so let's go on to the battle. And we execute 1 round of siege combat. The Belgians have 2 infantry units, a total of 3 steps, plus the 4 steps of the fortress, so the Germans need 7 hits to destroy the fortress of Liège, and 7 units they have. So we roll first for the Germans. And the Germans inflict 3 hits on the Belgians. Now the Belgians roll 2 dice for their infantry units plus 4 for the fortress for a total of 6 dice. The Belgians score 2 hits. So the Germans inflict more damage, but because the Belgians are defending in a fortress, they don't have to retreat, and they will not. Now the Belgians absorb their losses. The 3 hits eliminate the 2 infantry units. And the Germans have both infantry units in the middle row flipped to their reduced sides. So the siege of Liège rages on, and the German Second Army is being bloodied in the process. And that's the end of the Second Army's activation. On to the next chit. and it's the Zeppelin's German event marker. That can come in handy for both German armies that haven't moved yet. On to the next chit, and it's von Kluck's first German army. And von Kluck will not force march because his army is surrounded by enemy units, but will definitely be using the Zeppelin's event. The Belgians have 3 steps of units at Hasselt and 4 steps at Tienen. The German First Army has not suffered any hits. It has a total of 14 steps in 8 units. So the German army will split itself in half and attack both Tienen and Hasselt. 4 units will attack each of the 2 Belgian cities. So first we move the units. The Germans attack Hasselt and Tienen simultaneously, and we will resolve the combat at Hasselt first. The Belgians have 3 steps, the Germans 7, and the Germans will not use their Zeppelin event for this combat, but for the one at Tienen. So the Germans roll first. The Germans only inflict 1 hit. Now the Belgians roll, and if they inflict at least 1 hit, the Germans will have to retreat back to Tongeren. And the Belgians inflict 1 hit on the Germans. The Belgians reduced their 5th Infantry Division. The Germans reduced their infantry brigade. It has just 1 step, so it is eliminated. The Belgians have held their ground at Hasselt. The Germans retreat back to Tongeren. And now to the combat at Tienen. The Germans need to win this combat to maintain momentum, and to ensure that they do, they play the Zeppelin's event, so the units will have a +1 added to their respective die rolls. So we roll first for the Germans. And the Germans score 3 hits. Now the Belgians fire back, and they score no hits at all. The 2nd Belgian division is destroyed and the 1st is reduced. The surviving Belgian division has to retreat, and it will do so into Louvain. That's the end of the 1st German Army's activation. Still pending activation is the German 3rd Army near Namur and the French 5th Army at Hirson. Note that the Allied Force March event has not been pulled yet, so if the French Army is activated, it will not be able to reach Namur. So we pull the next chit, and it's the 1st turn end marker. We pull the next chit, the 2nd turned end marker. Now we pull another chit, and it's the 3rd turned end marker. All 3 turn markers in a row. So that means that the 3rd German army may be activated with the risk of an atrocity occurring, but worse for the Allies, the French 5th Army will not be activated at all. It remains stationed at Hirson. The 3rd German Army is a force march away from Namur. Namur is being defended by an infantry brigade and the fortress, a total of 5 steps. So the Germans will go for it for the activation of the 3rd Army, and we have to roll for atrocities. On a 1 to 3, no atrocities. 4 through 6, the marker will be moved to the number 3 box. And the roll is a 4, another atrocity. 2 more atrocities, and it will be game over for the Germans. But now the 3rd Army is activated. It is within range of the fortress of Namur, only if it force marches. And the Germans play the force march event. So the cavalry easily makes it to Namur, and the infantry with 3 movement factors moves into Marsch, spending 2 and its last movement factor to reach Namur. Now we move on to 1 round of siege combat. The Belgians have a total of 5 steps, 4 for the fortress and 1 for their infantry brigade. And the Germans have 6 units, and we roll for the Germans first. And the Germans score 3 hits. Now the Belgians roll 1 die for their infantry brigade and 4 for the fortress. And the Belgians inflict 2 hits. Now we assess the losses. The Belgians lose their 15th brigade. That's 1 step, and they rotate the fortress counter 180 degrees, and it has 2 steps left. The Germans eliminate their infantry brigade, and they flip one of their infantry corps that hits with 5s to its reduced side. And the Belgians have lost this combat, but the fortress still holds on. And the siege of Namur rages on, and the fortress may not hold much longer. This is the end of this second turn. The game moves on to the August 10 to 12th turn, and both the French and German 4th armies can be activated in this next turn. And we place the 2 activation markers in the cup. The French 4th army is more than 1 turn's march from Namur. The Belgians' hopes of holding the fortress still depend on the French 5th Army. Is it still on time? Liège is down to the fortress garrison. The German 1st Army has scant Belgian resistance in front of it. And barring any atrocious luck, it is 2 turns away from crossing the victory line. The German 4th Army may be activated in the next turn. It is a long way from the action in Namur and Liège. The Belgian garrison of the fortress of Namur is holding on by their teeth. The Germans cannot afford 2 more atrocities. So, will the forts fall? Stay tuned for the next turn of Brave Little Belgium. This is Stuka Joe signing off for now. Thanks for watching.